Hey guys, and welcome to Mindset Talk with Coach MT. I am the founder of Simply the Best Life Coach Academy, and today we're going to talk about communication. The title was, If Communication Rules the Nation, then why are we so bad at it? Why do you think that is? Drop it in the comments. I'm interested to see what you guys have to say about it, or how effective of a communicator do you think you are? So you are here because you want to know more about actually actively communicating in the way that we should to get solutions to problems that we see today in the world. So my point in rolling out this episode is to help us to effectively communicate. Now, some of the reasons why we may struggle, of course, we're aware of, could be stuff such as cultural and social norms, the role of technology, emotional blocks, and for lack of training. We know that, right? So one of the things that I go through or over with all of my coaching clients, whether they are life coaches or they are in for life coaching, is listening to what's really being heard. Active listening. And basically that's what it is. Listening to what's actively being said and not listening to respond, as most of us do, because we're all about getting our point across. But we need to communicate in a way that most of the conversations that you are here to talk about is you want a workable solution. So when you're focused on communicating to come to a workable solution, getting your point across is not the goal. So keep that in the back of your mind. Now, another way that we can affect the way we communicate is, of course, this face that we have. I am the world's worst about, like, whatever I think, it's on my face. It don't even have to come out of my mouth. A lot of times you can know what I'm thinking by what this mask on my face is doing. Then the nonverbal cues. All this stuff you're aware of, we already know. So we already working on that, right? Or if you're not, we're going to work on that, right? So some of the areas that people are most interested in effectively communicating is going to be our personal relationships, right? Then in the professional setting and social settings. So we're going to become more self-aware and reflect on how we communicate. We're going to implement active listening. We're going to clear and concisely express what we're trying to say, and we're going to show some empathy. Right now, I want to go over a couple of quotes, and the opening quote for this episode is, to help us out here, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place, by George Bernard Shaw. Now, how many of y'all watch TikToks or anything like that? Y'all know. So, you have seen plenty of those episodes where what you heard was a whole bunch of noise. That was not communication. But the individuals that was engaging in that communication thought they were communicating, but it was just a whole bunch of noise. And then what is it to us lay people that watch it? What does it end up being? I'm going to let y'all drop that in the comments too. Entertainment. That's exactly what it is. Because they're not effectively communicating, they're putting on a performance. And so even if they are performing for each other, but you're not going to get to a workable solution by doing that, because they are focused on getting their point across. That is not the goal. Most of the time, the points that we're trying to get across not even important. Did I say that? Yes, I did. So the book that I'm going to point you to help you do the work to learn how to effectively communicate is Crucial Conversations, Tools for When Stakes Are High. That is the book. I don't get any kind of financial compensation for recommending that. I've used it in my personal life as well inside of my coaching practice, so that's why I recommend it. So I encourage you to go once again and look at Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High. That's the name of the book. I'm going to reference a couple of some of the quotes to explain, give you a little bit of insight of why. But before I do that, let's test our knowledge. When you're having a conversation, there are two sides to every story, right? Wrong. There are 3 sides to every story. 3 sides to every story. Remember that, say it out loud, put it to memory. There is what you heard or said that happened. There's what the other party heard or said that happened. And then there's what actually happened. And so that book rolls it out, because we don't have enough time today, but that book rolls it out and helps you to learn how to move through those things by implementing the skills that I've already pointed out, active listening and such. And then it goes a little bit more in depth to show you what's really going on throughout the conversation. Now, one of the things that I want to point out is that what's happening when we struggle to communicate is that we are reinforcing emotional bias, we're blocking empathy and understanding, and we're escalating conflict. So how are we reinforcing emotional bias? This is a mental category that we came up with a long time ago, and I'm going to shed some light on that in just a minute. We're going to share what the scholars say about this, but something we came up with a long time ago, and we categorize people as they're talking, as we're communicating. So reinforcing emotional bias, according to the text, would be we're going to categorize people in 3 ways. They're either going to be the villains, the victims, or helpless. And when we break this down in just a moment, you're going to see what I'm talking about. Number 2, we're going to block empathy and understanding. This is a mental framework that we use. And all this stuff that I'm talking about is automatic. We do this. We've trained ourselves to do this. We use a mental framework as a barrier to empathy. So what I mean by that is we label someone as argumentative, as being conflictive. We see them as conflict when they come and they talk to us about things. You know that person. When you categorize somebody in that area, you are less likely to consider what they're even saying, because you already prejudged them based off of past experiences or whatever. But we prejudged that person. So that's blocking empathy and understanding. Then we're going to escalate conflict. By framing people in the roles that I listed, we are often respond with blaming the person out of frustration, or you know, go off on them, what we watch on those videos and such, or we just totally shut down and disengage. Sometimes the other disrespect, we will hang up on them or we will walk off. So I wanted to bring that to our attention, and then we're going to break it down and talk about what that actually looks like. So now that you've become aware of those, let's look at, let me find my little notes here, because it's a whole lot of information to keep inside of my head, y'all. And I'm also going to share with you why I have the notes as an example. So let's stick with number 1. The villain mindset. What does that look like? It looks like exactly what it says. So we're going to view that person as being malicious intent, causing harm and acting in a negative way. And that often happens when our feelings are hurt, when we're frustrated, or we're blocked from achieving a goal. That's usually when we fall into the victim mindset. We view someone as a villain, and that leads to us being what? Defensive. We get on the defense. We even maybe will be a little aggressive and come off closing off any other opportunities to come to any kind of workable solution. We won't even want to talk about it because we're mad. We use the villain mindset. An example of this would be in like workplace conflict, usually when we see this. Say a colleague disagrees with an idea that you're really passionate about. You see them as being the villain. They coming for you. They coming at you. You didn't take time to actively do what? Listen. We didn't take time to actively listen to even see if they were asking a legitimate question or not, so that we could clarify. So we automatically categorize them as being the villain. Now, when we're using the victim mindset, what do you think that means? We're going to see the person as what? believing that they are the victim all the time. They're powerless. They're unfairly treated all the time. They're suffering at the hands of others. So we mentally create a space of what we call helplessness, and exaggerates it. Negative aspects of that situation. Y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. We even have a term that we use, play the victim. You've most likely used it before. So when we adopt the victim mindset, this can prevent us from taking responsibility for our own role. And we just view the situation as unfair for whatever reason. We discourage any kind of problem solving whatsoever. So we just close off. And let's say an example of this would be if a team member misses a deadline. And then so what that does to you is that you are not able to produce the product because that team member missed the deadline. So y'all missed it all together. Y'all messed up. So you're like, oh, I can't do anything because they're so unreliable. How many of you business owners and leaders have said that? And you use it as this is off topic, but you use it as an excuse not to delegate. So, and then we leave it there. And you don't go in further. You're not open to discussion or coming to any kind of workable solution. It's we don't go into asking questions about what happened or anything like that. We're just, they missed the deadline, it's their fault, and I can't do anything because of them. You see where we didn't take accountability for that, for anything? It's all on them. Now, then we're going to have the helpless mindset. And this one's going to be a little bit worse than that. So what that means is you view someone or yourself as helpless in the perspective of they are totally incapable of having whatever conversation you're trying to have or handling the situation that needs to be handled. They can't do it because they lack the skills, the willpower, or intelligence to do it. How many of you guys have, I know I've been there, but I'm not even finna go there with you. Have you said that? I bet you said it a lot recently because right now we're in reserve mode. We don't have time for any kind of foolishness. Well, that's not always going to be able to be the case. Sometimes you're going to have to go there with those individuals because we're talking about the people that we're in relationships with personally, like our spouse. We're talking about workplace concerns. You're trying to climb their corporate ladder. And we're talking about your business or entrepreneurship. So you're going to have some uncomfortable conversations. So that was the point in this pointing out, just to recap, the villain mindset, the victim mindset, and helpless mindset. You can request this handout so that you can have more information later. I know this is a lot, but we've identified those threes. Now, earlier we talked about why those mindsets hinder, and then I'm going to go a little bit further, a little bit. Remember I said they reinforce our emotional bias, they block empathy and understanding, and they escalate conflict. So now, before we get into how we overcome these mental labels, I want to talk about when we started doing this in the first place. When do you think? Drop it in the comments. So, according to the scholars, we started creating these cognitive bias. I like to break things down and keep it in layman terms, mental shortcuts. We started creating these things in our brain because your brain is trying to work efficiently and fast, and we started creating them around the age of 3 to 5 years old. That's when we started creating these shortcuts. That's all that a mental or emotional bias is, those categories that we discussed. When we categorize people as the victim or helplessness, or those categories, that's a mental shortcut. So we started creating those between the age of 3 to 5 because at that age, our brain is actually capable of processing information quickly and efficiently. So it's trying to work quicker and more efficiently that, hey, you're moving around a little bit faster now. So the mental shortcuts help them to navigate the environment, make quick decisions, recognize familiar faces, and such and so on. So that's when we started. Now, as children grow, as we grew up, these categories should have been nurtured to help us to create better bias, lack of a better term, but they should have been fine-tuned to mature. Some of us it did, some of us not so much. So now around, the scholars say by adolescence, cognitive biases are more fully developed and the brain increasingly relies on these shortcuts to handle the growing complexity of social and cognitive tasks. You think about it, we're starting to do more things, get outside the house, go some places by ourselves. You know, your parents aren't doing everything for you. And then, so now we're in adulthood. And the brain begins forming these patterns. I can't talk today. The brain begins forming these patterns early in life, cognitive biases, and continue to evolve throughout our adulthood. So, and shape experiences by our habits and our learning. So, we're going to look at some reasons to why a person may be or is stuck, maybe in adolescence. Some of us, we feel like they act like 2-year-olds, or some people have said we act like 2-year-olds. For whatever reason, that part didn't get nurtured, and it didn't form the way that it was supposed to, due to probably lack of engagement. Do you come from a home where you didn't have the opportunity to get out and socially engage? Did you were you an introverted, shy type child that was not pushed out to learn how to do that? So if you were not put into like social experiences, then all the way through adolescence, and then now you're an adult and you're expected to know how to interact in the social field, and you're having maybe some social anxiety a little bit, some of us maybe, but you're having difficulty because those biases were created and left how they were, and now we have to actively come and do work to help them to grow. So that's what's really going on with that. Then we have another thing is that if a person we said that communication is highly influenced by culture as well, right? So if you have an individual that was always around people that looked and acted like them and even talked like them, and then they're exposed to people that are different, that's going to be a little bit difficult, because we ain't even talking about a language barrier here. We're talking about just the way that the culture handles things in the communication as far as that. Then we may have a language barrier on top of that, but we're not even going to touch that right now. Also, then we have our relationships. Were you actually even in relationships? Were you exposed to positive relationships? Were you exposed to opportunities to see people to problem solve and come up with actionable solutions? Or were you exposed to people fighting all the time? Were you exposed to people shutting down all the time? Those things that we were exposed to when we were children, we are seeing the result of it now. So hence, that's why you're still on the podcast here today. So what are we going to do with this new information that we just got? So we're going to overcome these mental labels, because we are perfectly capable of doing that, and we want to. So we're going to recognize our triggers, and we're going to recognize when we're falling into these said categories. That's how we're going to know how to act. So you're going to ask yourself, am I unfairly categorizing someone in a sense of emotion based on I didn't get what I want, based on I don't like the way this is making me feel, things of that nature? Am I unfairly, unjustly judging this in particular situation? Because you have to make a judgment call, right? Like, the judgment call is what's going on here. But am I unfairly putting them in one of those categories? And if the answer is yes, then we can think to what workable solution we can come up with to keep this from escalating, right? Then we're going to practice empathy. We're going to make an effort to understand the person's emotional state by asking open-ended questions. We're going to listen to their perspective. We're going to ask questions like, okay, can you help me to understand where you're coming from? The point is, don't ask them questions that they can say yes and no, and don't say questions that are actually a statement. Y'all know what I'm talking about. You know, we going back and forth because we got real good at clapping back. So asking open-ended questions and keep it simple. Don't try to dress it up or make it sound fly. Because the point is, remember when I said in the beginning that our point was not important? The point is not to get our point across. The point is to come up with a workable solution so we can effectively communicate. And so when we do that, after we do these next couple of steps, then we maybe can present your point later if it really is valid, if it really is necessary, if it really is kind. That today, maybe later on in the day. Because tomorrow, guess what? Your point probably won't even matter to you. Because while you're working on this workable solution, you fix whatever your point was going to address. Next, you're going to take responsibility. Instead of seeing yourself as a victim, you're going to ask, what role did I play in this? And then you're going to take accountability. You know what that looks like? Saying and meaning, I take accountability for doing that. And then you're going to put a period. Not a pause, not a semicolon, not a comma. One of the problems that we see is that we want to put a comma right there. I take accountability for doing that, but you was getting on my nerves. I take accountability for doing that, but I didn't like what you said. I take accountability for doing that, but you know how I am. No, that's not the way this works. So I take accountability for doing that. Period. Take a breath. Think about what or if you're going to say something next. Give the other person time to say something. Then we're going to shift to problem solving. So I take accountability for doing that. Period. We're giving the other person time to respond, and we're listening. We're listening to what's being said. Coaches, you're listening to what's being said and what's not being said, right? So then you're going to shift to problem solving mode, and instead of blaming and defaulting to the helpless mode, you're going to turn your attention to finding a solution for whatever the problem is that we're trying to communicate about. So we're going to ask questions like, what can we do to move forward? What can we do to ensure that this won't happen again, or ensure to decrease the chances of this happening again? For example, remember with the project that we were working on with the team, we could say, take accountability for your role in this and say, obviously there's a big communication gap if somebody didn't complete their assignment. How come no one knew that? So you can open and be like, what can we as a team do to decrease the likelihood of you not meeting the deadline next time? How can we help? There's this show, and the doctor, I love how he goes around and he tells everybody his name and he says, how can I help? It's that simple. It's that simple. Now, since we know how to overcome those mental labels, that's what you're going to go and you're going to implement. So with you doing this, you're going to be furthering the progression of us, those mental bias that we have that we created when we were 3 or 5. And then they grew a little bit, or when we were adolescents, and then maybe teens, maybe early adulthood. But now you're in a different period. And then think about the individuals that it didn't. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to give yourself grace as well as the other individual. And this is going to be a work. The communication rules the nation. And why are we so bad at it? That's everybody. Look at the state of the world today. We are horrible at communicating effectively. We are horrible at it. So, and guess what? We didn't get like this overnight. So it's not going to be fixed overnight either. So give yourself grace with that. But one of the best things that one of my coaches did was cancel the mindset of trying. And then we redirected it. So you're going to cancel that. You're not going to log off this podcast and say, well, I'm going to try to implement this. This is what you mean when you say you're going to try. You're going to do it. And how do you know that you're doing it? Because you're messing it up, because you're making mistakes, because you're going to come back with questions. you're going to come back with clapbacks. I did such and such and such, and they still went off on me. It's going to cause further conversations. That's how our teacher knew back in elementary that we didn't do the assignment, because we didn't have any questions on something that we seen the first time. So remember, give each other grace, because we've been working on this for decades to get to where we are today. And I commend you for being here and for taking the time to listen and to learn. And now I'm going to talk to my life coaches a little bit. You're welcome to stay, but I'm going to talk to my life coaches that are on the call. So we talked about communication, because this is very important inside of your life coach program. Prepare to dedicate a whole bunch of time focusing on communication. That is a very critical, important skill. Now, what we can do here is we're going to teach our clients how to what? Recognize the mindsets. We did that, right? We recognize the villain, the victim, and the helplessness. Now, we're going to help the clients become more aware so they can know when they're slipping into those categories. Then we're going to position them to do what? To reframe and encourage the clients to reframe the conflict situations, and instead of go from blaming someone to asking curious questions, figuring what's going on here, instead of defaulting to limited narratives. So we're going to focus on reframing here. Then we're going to foster the accountability. We're going to move away from the victim and helpless mindset, because you're not a victim and you're not helpless. And we're going to help them to take more ownership and to take some action with their responses, with what they do, with their body language. And this is going to help them in their personal growth, as well as fostering healthier relationships overall. Those are some things that we can do. So those of you guys that maybe want the handouts that I was reading from, or want to know a little bit more, discuss this topic a little further, feel free to go to simplythebestcoach.com and book your AHA consultation. This is open to you guys who wish to work as a life coaching client, as well as those of you who are on your journey to being a transformational life coach. I would love the opportunity to guide you along that path. But thank you so much for your time and attention. My name is Coach MT. Once again, I'm the founder of Simply the Best Life Coach Academy. And this has been an episode of Mindset Talk. Y'all go out there and effectively communicate. Please share this with someone. Feel free to share it with someone that you want to have an effective communication with. Sometimes we just have to hear somebody else say it. Y'all have a good day. Bye-bye.